Hello, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this online conference on consumer protection in the digital age. I'm Melinda Crane, and on behalf of our hosts and co-organizers, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the German Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, it is a great pleasure and honor to accompany you as moderator today and tomorrow. Today's event is the second in a series exploring how we can ensure a safer, more transparent, and accountable online environment for consumers by enabling them to control their own data and to gain access to legal remedies when transactions go wrong. As you know, our topic couldn't be more timely. COVID-19 has fast-forwarded digitalization in a multitude of areas, including especially e-commerce. That's the upside. The downside is that over the past 20 months, we have also seen a rise in unfair business practices and disinformation online. And that presents crucial challenges which we want to address in this conference by providing a forum for all of you, whether you come from government, academia, business, or are simply an interested citizen, to share experiences and best practices. We'll hear more in a moment from our hosts. But first, let me say just a brief word about how you, dear ladies and gentlemen, can participate in our discussions. All registered participants are invited to send brief comments via our chat function. You should see the chat window on the right side of your screens of this streaming platform. You may also submit questions through the question window that is just below that chat function. And I will be passing on those questions to our speakers later on in the proceedings. We are also very eager to get your opinion, ladies and gentlemen, and for that purpose, we will take audience polls from time to time. I'd like to do just a very quick test of our polling tool for that purpose. You will now see our multiple choice question on the right side of your screens, just below the chat, and I will read off the question, and then I'd like to ask you to please choose one option and click on it. So here's our question. From what location are you connecting to the online conference? And our answers are A, from the office, B, from home, C, on the road, train, bus, taxi, car, D, cafe, restaurant, and E, a place which must not be named, as Harry Potter might have said. So please do vote now, and we'll get a quick look at those results. And still some votes coming in. Just going to give this a moment of time. Interestingly enough, we are seeing that the majority of you are still in, I presume, home offices or simply at home. Not quite the end of the day yet in Asia, but getting there. So looks like the votes are pretty much all in. We see nearly 61% saying they're connecting from home and just under 40% saying they're connecting from the office. And apparently no one is in a place which should not be named, so I guess that's good. Finally, dear ladies and gentlemen, and especially dear speakers, I would like to just give you a very gentle reminder about timekeeping. We have an exciting but also quite a dense program over the next 2 days, so I would be very grateful if you would please keep your remarks within the allotted time that we have agreed on. And now, let us get started, and we begin with opening remarks from ASEAN. It's an honor to give the floor to the Secretary General of Malaysia's Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, His Excellency Datuk Seri Haji Hasno Zamzam bin Haji Ahmad. You have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ms. Melinda Crane, Mr. Christian Castro, State Secretary, the German Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, or BMJV, Mr. Looi Teck Kheong, Head Competition Consumer Protection and International and Intellectual Property Rights Division, the ASEAN Secretariat, colleagues of the BMJV, members of the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection or ACCP, members of the ASEAN Coordinating Committee on Electronic Commerce or ACCEC, members of the ASEAN Consumer Association Network or ACAN, colleagues of the ASEAN Secretariat, distinguished speakers, distinguished panelists, and distinguished attendees of this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and good morning. Allow me to begin my welcoming remarks by expressing my sincere appreciation to the German Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, or BMJV, for organizing this conference with the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection, or ACCP. It is my pleasure to join you today to open the BMJV ACCP online conference on consumer protection in the digital age, on how can digital self-determination and access to justice be guaranteed. Before I begin, I wish all participants present today who are tuning in to our online stream from their respective homes or workplace are healthy, safe, and well amidst the continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, the information age drastically evolved in recent years and has significantly changed and influenced millions of lives around the world for the better. We have seen advancement in smartphones, laptops, and tablet technology, as well as the World Wide Web and wireless communication. These are now becoming more and more accessible and affordable. These technologies have become an integral part of our life, where we depend on them to do our work, assist us in school, and more. We are at the point of our lives where we could not do without the technology. Nowadays, users are not confined to using the web for information, communication, and entertainment. They are also using them to purchase goods and services, thus transforming them into online consumers. We refer to this online shopping phenomenon as e-commerce. E-commerce provided consumers with seemingly unlimited selection and variety of products to purchase at competitive prices. Over recent years, its market size grew exponentially, with many e-commerce startups in ASEAN and around the world reportedly becoming tech giants, unicorns, or decacorns, as they call it, seemingly overnight. The current COVID-19 epidemic has shown the importance of e-commerce, especially during lockdowns, where consumers depend on online platforms to purchase essential goods while still observing COVID-19 health protocols at home. Of course, like many things in life, there are downsides to this sudden success. Users, and especially online consumers, are at risk of cybercrimes as more and more are switching to internet e-commerce platforms to do their shopping and make investments. These risks include theft of sensitive information, such as passwords, banking accounts, social security numbers, personal identification, residential address, age and credit card numbers. Consumers are also vulnerable to a variety of scams, such as misleading or deceptive advertisement of fake information, and many more committed by fraudulent individuals or online businesses. These problems became pronounced during the pandemic as abuse and unfair trade practices by fraudulent online businesses increased substantially. Therefore, protecting and empowering consumer rights offline and online is crucial to build confidence and instill trust in these internet platforms for long-term sustainability. Consumer protection has long been recognized as an integral part of the ASEAN economic and social integration process. For almost 15 years, the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection, or the ACCP, has worked to ensure that consumer protection takes central stage in regional policy-making agenda. Efforts by the ACCP are aimed at ensuring that consumer protection measures, including laws, regulations, and policies, are now in place in all 10 ASEAN member states. There is a focus on developing mechanisms for consumer redress and ensuring product recalls are in place, as well as improving and strengthening the capacities of consumer protection authorities. There is also an ardent desire to enhance consumer access to information. Some of the notable recent ACCP achievements related to today's conference include the development and dissemination of the Code of Good Online Business Practice in ASEAN and the simultaneous launch of 3 regional campaigns on consumer education on online shopping. These initiatives are in line with the strategic approaches adopted under the ASEAN Economic Community or AEC Blueprint 2015 to 2025 and the more detailed initiatives under the ASEAN Strategic Action Plan on Consumer Protection, also known as the ASAPCP 2020. A detailed presentation on the ASAPCP and its deliverables will be presented by our keynote speaker, Mr. Looi of the ASEAN Secretariat. Ladies and gentlemen, the ASEAN High-Level Principles or the AHLP for Consumer Protection, published on July 2017 at the ASEAN Consumer website, intends to support AMS in their efforts to improve consumer protection in the legislative, institutional, and other dimensions. The AHLP provides a broad framework for AMS seeking to achieve the goals of the ASAPCP 2021 in the development of laws, regulations, and enforcement arrangements. Principle 8 of the AHLP states that all AMS are to conduct regular reviews of existing consumer protection laws and practices to determine amendments or additional subsidiary legislations needed to be implemented to provide effective protection to consumers online. The goal in improving and upholding consumer protection in ASEAN is the main reason the ACCP are cooperating with the BMJV. This cooperation started first with a workshop for consumer protection authorities on e-commerce that took place in June 2021. This 2-day conference will act as a forum where policymakers, academics, practitioners, and the public can exchange information, experiences, and dialogues on emerging issues in consumer policy and advocacy across Germany, Europe, and the ASEAN region. In this conference for day 1, we will hear our esteemed speakers talk and discuss about 1. Consumer policy in the digital age, its challenges and perspectives. 2. A detailed presentation on ASEAN's priorities in strengthening consumer protection in the digital age. 3. What are some consumer risks in the evolving digital landscape in ASEAN? 4. Promoting digital self-determination of consumers, which will be divided into 2 parts. The first, digital empowerment with a special focus on vulnerable consumers. And second, best practices on consumer enabling technologies. For day 2 of the conference, we will hear our esteemed speakers talk and discuss about 1. New technologies to facilitate consumer access to redress, and 2. A panel discussion on the role of civil society, business and policymakers or regulators in shaping digital consumer policy. Ladies and gentlemen, the digital economy in ASEAN is here to stay and will become a main driver in economic growth for the foreseeable future. Consumer protection agencies in ASEAN must therefore continue relentlessly to upgrade their digital policy-making skill set and strengthen cross-sectoral and cross-border cooperation to deal with emerging e-commerce issues and unforeseen challenges in the digital economy. Before I end, I would like to thank once again everyone, especially the BMJV and the ACCP for organizing this conference, the GIZ colleagues for their continued support, the ASEAN Secretariat, the consumer associations from the Europe and ASEAN, panelists and speakers, and last but not least, distinguished delegates and participants for your attendance. Thank you, stay safe, and back to you, Ms. Melinda Craig.
Excellency, Secretary General, thank you very much for your remarks, for that outlook, and also for your reminder that the pandemic has ushered in changes in the way that we work and shop that are undoubtedly here to stay. And I think our audience poll that we took a little bit earlier is a reminder of that. It's the middle of the business day, both here in Europe and in Asia. And in fact, well over half of the audience is working from home. So many thanks for that. Dear ladies and gentlemen, if you were present at the workshop in June that was just mentioned by the Secretary General, then you will remember that our host and co-organizer, Germany, as well as the European Union, has made consumer protection of online consumers, a key focus of its recent policy initiatives. We hear more now in a keynote on consumer policy in the digital age. It is a great pleasure to hand over to the State Secretary in Germany's Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, His Excellency Christian Kastrup. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Melinda. Honorable Secretary General, Under Secretary, Assistant Director, dear speakers, dear colleagues from ASEAN, GIZ and BMGV, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's conference on consumer protection in the digital age, jointly organized by the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, supported by the GIZ. As State Secretary for Consumer Protection and Digital Society, I'm quite honored to have the opportunity to speak to you about challenges and perspectives in consumer policy in the digital age and the very important issues you are addressing, particularly in today's sessions. We will focus on digital self-determination and access to justice in our countries, key issues for consumers in an economy shaped more and more by digital business models with high dynamics, for instance, e-commerce platforms and social networks. Let me say that this international conference is a further step in our hopefully rich and fruitful cooperation on the matter of digital consumer protection. We started off with a workshop on challenges, the need for action, and best practices for e-commerce in June of this extraordinary, still pandemic year. Digital technologies are shaping the modern life. They bring about benefits for consumers. Think of the new ways we found to communicate in the ongoing pandemia, holding virtual meetings and learning in the digital space. And I think most or nearly all of us have become acutely aware of the digital revolution taking place right around us. Children faced homeschooling, employees have been working mainly from home office, working remotely. And it took some time to get technology to everybody, even in Germany. So not only consumers, but also the economy as a whole can hugely benefit from digitalization. And modern technologies are able to boost productivity and growth. By this way, it can also help us to reduce poverty and increase living standards on a global level. So in addition, these technologies can also help us battle challenges like climate change. But beyond this, however, we must also draw our attention on the, so-called dark side of these technologies and potential disadvantages we should avoid. So many consumers face manipulative design features For instance, dark patterns is a very popular word here, on online platforms. Design tricks force consumers in their daily decisions to disclose, for instance, personal data unnecessarily. They spend more money than needed, and they develop, in the worst case, addictive behavioral patterns, and ultimately lose their trust in the digital innovation, and this will harm us all. For example, through personalized advertisement and manipulative designs, children and teens are induced to conducing purchases while playing online games. Therefore, it's more important, really, to empower especially vulnerable consumers to navigate successfully in digital environments. And therefore, we must strengthen digital literacy. So, however, the dark side not just applies to consumers, but also to firms and markets. Platform regulation is the first pressing issue in these times. Big platforms especially have an enormous market power. So this is also bad for consumers, as these platforms can easily influence purchasing behavior in providing information via social media channels. On the other hand, these, say, natural monopolies with network effects can also have an impact, they have already an impact on competition and market activity. If these platforms act like a gatekeeper for the markets and regulate the access, then in the end, large platforms alone may decide what consumers see or what information is made available for them. So, and this can not only harm consumers, but it is mean in the end it can be less innovation, less productivity, and less competition will mean less economic growth. So this is unacceptable, not only to the economic sphere, but also to the consumers. And therefore we discuss new regulatory measures here in the European countries. So let me just highlight two very important issues where my ministry is also very usually involved with. This is the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. In the Digital Services Act, we advocate for greater responsibilities of e-commerce platforms and online marketplaces to protect consumers. We believe that they should take a more proactive role in identifying and preventing content, for instance, related to illegal or false offers, unapproved or unsafe products or dangerous goods as such. Also, plagiarism is an important issue here. With a new legal package in place, will take some time. We are just starting the European consultation, then of course the national consultations will follow. But if this is dealt with, then these platforms will be responsible for ensuring that no fake shops, clearly illegal or fraudulent offers appear on the platform. So, and this is then what we meant also with the label fairness by design. So, both the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act aim at reducing this market power. So, let me give you some figures. In 2002, consumers paid an average of 15% in surcharges. In 2016, it was almost 28%. So this can be explained in part by the fact that companies, for instance Amazon, have become gatekeepers for many participants. So they have the power to dominate or set the prices. And it's especially consumers with low income who suffer most from this. And this also is true on a global level, and this will lead not to inclusion, but increasing social inequality. Let me give you some views on artificial intelligence, where my house is co-responsible in the government for the negotiations in Europe. Artificial intelligence is certainly one of the most disruptive and most pressing issues at the time. It offers enormous opportunities, economically, but also for civil society and consumers. It will help meet great challenges, climate change, stabilizing democracy. Nevertheless, it also poses risks. This is again the risk of discrimination, a lack of transparency of many AI systems. So, specific dangers can arise also if you have mass surveillance in public spaces, and this can even impair privacy very much. And also, coming back to the platform issue, of course, where AI is used, we have again the risk of manipulation through artificial intelligence, also in political elections and on online platforms. Algorithms can display what information is there to people, and they can also create social media bubbles, or in the end lead you to the very famous echo rooms where you just listen to things which you like to hear. So this leads to a fragmentation of the public discourse, a threat to balanced and open information from both sides or three sides, and therefore it can endanger democratic processes in all over the world. So, and this is why the Commission's Artificial Intelligence Act is really featuring the fundamental rights of the European citizens and has concrete regulations for AI mechanisms. Under the current draft, nevertheless, still consumers could have more rights. So there is not really a close relationship between the developers, the users of AI, and those people where the AI is used on them. So this is still something we need to work on hard. And we need, in the end, an ecosystem which I would call a kind of a human-centric digital governance, which was also a last highlight when we did the Global Solutions Summit of the G20 here in Berlin. So we need a set of institutions with actors from civil society, firms and science to jointly design criteria for artificial intelligence. It must always serve people and the common and the public good. This gives also social society a kind of a say in all these processes. So there is indeed no trade-off, this is at least what we believe, between human-centric digital governance and innovation of great new high productive business models. But we need to start from the beginning also to think about trust, acceptance and legal certainty. So technical innovation and legal requirements for technology are not mutually exclusive. So let me now come to the second day. So in the second day we will focus on the ways in which consumers can access to justice by means of new digital tools. So further steps towards the digitalization of our justice systems have enormous potential to facilitate and improve access to justice for all our citizens. And digital tools can help to have a better structure of proceedings in law processes to automate and accelerate the handling of standardized and uniform tasks, increasing the effectiveness and also the efficiency of court proceedings. What is important to me is that the digital reorientation of court proceedings should focus on expanding access to justice in the service of citizens. This is the crucial term. So in line with this people-centered design approach, it may be necessary to retain traditional non-digital processes alongside the new digital formats. So I really cannot imagine that a final legal say is just done by an artificial intelligence. There need still to be a human control for that. So we will also discuss how new technologies can facilitate consumer access to justice, and this is with some new, also very interesting economic idea. This is the opportunities which are offered by so-called legal tech institutions. And in the closing panel we will discuss which role civil society, business and policymakers as regulators should have in shaping the digital consumer policy in this legal part. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an ambitious program ahead of us, so we are quite excited for the inputs and discussions to unfold. So, let me finally take this opportunity to thank the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations again, along with my ministry and the GIZ and our excellent moderator for the excellent cooperation so far, also in organizing this conference. And I believe this is valuable to exchange inputs on that topic also across the world, across our different cultures. This is a fantastic piece of cooperation between Germany, Europe and ASEAN. So I'm thankful for everyone being so open and eager to work jointly on making this conference happen. So I wish you all an excellent conference with great inputs and many valuable takeaways.
Thank you very much, State Secretary, for that wide-ranging look at both the promise and also the downside of the expanding online marketplace. And you've also presented some very compelling arguments about why it is so important that policy design put empowering consumers and citizens at the very heart of its efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, permit me just one word on the promise of the digital age before we turn to a keynote from the ASEAN Secretariat. The e-commerce sector is perhaps the largest growth sector in Southeast Asia at the moment. One study records an exponential surge in digital retail of 85% year-on-year since 2020 and predicts that almost 80% of consumers in Southeast Asia will go digital by the end of the year. Picking up now on the State Secretary's theme that there is no trade-off between human-centric digital governance and business innovation, we hear more now about ASEAN's initiatives to formulate guidelines for consumer protection and also to ensure dispute resolution in e-commerce. Dear ladies and gentlemen, please note that we do welcome your questions after this keynote. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to His Excellency, Mr. Looi Teck Kheong. He's head of the Competition, Consumer Protection and Intellectual Property Rights Division at the ASEAN Secretariat. Welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Melinda. Dato Sri Haji Hasnul Zamzam bin Haji Ahmad, Secretary General, Ministry Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, Malaysia. Mr. Christian Castro, State Secretary, Federal Ministry of Justice and Consumer Protection, Germany. Fellow speakers, panelists, moderator, representatives of the ACCP, ACCEC, and GIZ, distinguished delegates, and my fellow colleagues. I will be speaking to you on the ASEAN priorities in strengthening consumer protection in the digital age. Next slide, please. The outline of my presentation comes in 4 parts. I'll be speaking on the ASEAN digital strategy. We should deal on the ASEAN digital potential, the catalyst for e-commerce, and also what are the sectors involved. The second part of it will concern the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025, where I'll be dealing with the strategic action plan and also the committee that is involved in implementation, the ACCP. And also giving you a preview of the consumer protection laws in ASEAN. The third part of my speech concerns the ACCP deliverables for the digital economy and the work that we do to protect consumer, the businesses, and also government and other sectors. And the final part is on challenges for the ASEAN digital economy, where we'll be speaking a little bit on the challenges and the e-commerce guidelines that we are developing, and also some of the gatekeepers platform line issue that we'll be dealing with. Next slide, please. Just very quickly, we just had the 53rd ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting highlights, and it was held just 4 or 5 days ago on video conference under the Brunei Darussalam chairmanship, under the theme We Care, We Prepare, and We Prosper, and under the Bandar Seri Begawan Roadmap, which relates to the ASEAN digital strategy. The ASEAN Digital Transformation Agenda would accelerate the ASEAN's economic recovery and digital economy integration. The work plan on implementation of the ASEAN Agreement for e-commerce would be ratified by the ASEAN member states, had been endorsed. And the highlights would also include the planned consolidation strategy on the 4th Industrial Revolution, and also the cross-sectoral coordination under the ASEAN Digital Integration Framework Action Plan 2019 to 2025. And at the ASEAN Economics meeting, we have also launched the ASEAN Digital Integration Index, which is basically a baseline digital integration related index to measure the level of digital trade services available. Next slide, please. And as mentioned by Ms. Crane just now, the ASEAN digital potential is very great. The ASEAN internet penetration of the population penetration is between 40 to 90%. And the real GDP growth has reached about 4.8% in 2019, which outpaced the global growth at the rate of 2.9%. And ASEAN is also expected to become the 4th largest economy in 2020, and is on track to do so. We do have 650 million people who are youthful, and with nearly 60% of them below 35 years of age. Next slide, please. The COVID-19, of course, has created a catalyst for e-commerce, but other than that also, we have 40 million new users to add to the 400 million active users in 2020. Cash, of course, as a payment method have also declined from 48% to 37% in 2020, and e-wallet usage have rose from 18 to 25%. Other than that, the level of trust in e-commerce and the internet connectivity, out of 1 of 3 of the total digital service users are new. 94% of these new users intend to stay, and 80% of these users find tech helpful and indispensable. More importantly also, the mature sectors such as the e-commerce, transport and food, travel and media are also consolidated into this area. Deal activity has also picked up for the new sectors such as the fintech, health tech, ed tech, and among others, the B2B, SaaS, which is software as a service startups. Next slide, please. As also mentioned by Ms. Crane earlier, yes, our Southeast Asia internet economy is growing very fast. 2015 was only 32 billion. 2019 has become 100 billion and is projected to go to 2025 to 300 billion. Next slide, please. The various sectors which are involved in the development of the digital strategy is not just e-commerce alone. We will be also building on the digital infrastructure and connectivity, dealing on issues on relating to cybersecurity, and also digital inclusion and to building digital skills so that there's no digital divide that may arise as a result of the new digital economy. Then there's the issues of data governance, the respect for privacy, and also access to data for businesses and consumers. And finally, trade facilitation and logistics. Next slide, please. So in a quick nutshell, our ASEAN's digital strategy, we have a vision beginning from the year 2000 to 2021, starting with the ASEAN framework, moving ahead to establish the agreement to establish and implement the ASEAN single window, which is basically a unification of national single windows to expedite cargo clearance for trade expedition purposes, expeditiousness. And 2016, the ASEAN framework on personal data protection, ASEAN framework on digital data governance was developed in 2018. 2019, the ASEAN agreement on e-commerce, ASEAN digital framework action plan. In 2020, digital integration index, which have been developed. And finally, 2021, the ASEAN digital master plan 2025 work plan for e-commerce and the regional action plan for implementation of the UN group of government experts norms. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So in a quick nutshell, you see that at the very top, we intend to establish an open, secure, interoperable, competitive, and inclusive digital market. This will be, of course, supported by the 3 pillars of e-commerce being the new driver for digitalization on the basis of the work plan on e-commerce. And the middle column is to accelerate the digital transformation in all sectors based on the digital integration framework action plan, which we have developed. Together, they will foster, in the third column on the right side, the integration in the ASEAN ecosystem. This, of course, will be built upon the infrastructure that's been developed on digital connectivity and data, cybersecurity I mentioned earlier, and enabling laws and regulations, which are standards, would be in line with international best practices, and also the development of digital talent, and enabling innovation, R&D, and ensuring investment in startups could thrive in this sector. Next slide, please. So in a nutshell, you see that we do have a very massive and long vision for ASEAN digital strategy. As far as the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint is concerned, this contains the strategy to develop the regional integration of the economic community from 2021 2015 to 2025. And in it, of course, the roles of all the sectors have been set out. And with regard to the ASEAN consumer protection, there are a few strategic measures which are in line with our action plan. And this is to establish a common ASEAN consumer protection framework, promote a higher level of consumer empowerment and knowledge, build higher consumer confidence, and cross-border commercial transactions. Also to encourage consumer-related matters in ASEAN policies, and promote consumer protection measures in products and services. Next slide, please. And under the, next slide, please. Under the ASEAN Strategic Action Plan, next slide, please. There are, of course, 4 strategic goals, 11 outcomes, and 19 initiatives. Next slide, please. And we now spell out, just very quickly, next slide, please. The ASEAN Strategic Action Plan for Consumer Protection. You notice that the 4 strategic goals are on your left side, but on the right side are the outcomes to develop the high-level principles for consumer protection which have been done, recommendations for improving the effectiveness of consumers' protection regimes in ASEAN identified and implemented, and legal framework for consumer protection in AMS strengthened. And then another level, high level of consumer empowerment and knowledge to develop the capacity of consumer protection agents in ASEAN are strengthened. Next slide, please. Then under the strategic goals, high consumer confidence, the outcomes are to develop the existing dispute resolution and redress mechanism, and also the new dispute resolution and redress mechanism are set up in ASEAN to resolve domestic and cross-border disputes. Also, the outcomes of product safety enforcement in ASEAN is strengthened. In relation to the integrating consumer policies, we'll develop regional platforms and tools for in ASEAN to engage and provide information to consumers at large. Higher level of consumer empowerment is ensured. Impact assessment and social consumer protection issues are discussed at higher level to gain better traction. Next slide. So the ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection, the ACCP, they are the body that's responsible for implementing those deliverables, established in 2007 and endorsed by the ASEAN economic ministers. The ASEAN Consumer Association Network was established in 2018. So the focus is to provide exchange of information, experience of consumer protection policies, encourage the development and implementation of effective consumer protection laws and policies, empower ASEAN consumers, and also hold regular stakeholders engagements. And as far as the Consumer Association Network is concerned, to hold dialogues, workshop, public forums, and engage with them, and to strengthen the Consumer Association to encourage participation in standard setting. Next slide, please. You'll notice that the status of consumer protection laws in ASEAN, all 10 AMS have established consumer protection laws. Some of them are being revised in order to address the various emerging challenges in the digital economy. Next slide, please. The primary stakeholders for the ACCP activities, of course, are the ASEAN consumers, the ASEAN businesses, and also the ASEAN protection agencies and government institutions. Now I will deal with the third part of my address on the various deliverables which we have developed for the purposes of protecting the consumers. Next slide, please. On consumers, on the ASEAN consumers, we have the ASEAN Regional Information Campaign, as mentioned by the Secretary General in his welcoming remarks, where consumer education has been enhanced by educating on topics such as online shopping, consumer redress, misleading and deceptive advertisement in the marketplace. We have also developed the handbook on ASEAN consumer protection laws and regulations. This is, of course, to inform the public on ASEAN laws and regulation, on consumer protection, and also consumer protection agencies of ASEAN member states, their contact particulars and access and emails, the complaints mechanism available for redress and remedies, and also what are the information and national consumer associations that might be operating there. Next slide, please. Other than that, we have also developed we are developing the ASEAN online interactive and distance learning and e-learning modules. This is, of course, a set of online lessons and planned for the public with interactive multimedia and downloadable content. Tools to be hosted on the ACCP website with the following 4 modules: understanding consumer protection, becoming consumer champion, building consumer movement, and also mediating disputes. Next year, we will also be organizing the ASEAN Consumer Protection Conference as part of advocacy to discuss consumer protection issues in ASEAN. It is intended to get better traction and visibility of this issue to the public. And on the module on developing the ASEAN Consumer Association guidelines, which is ongoing, these are guidelines which is to cover organizational topics relevant to running and also future consumer associations in ASEAN. Next slide, please. For the ASEAN business, and also for the purposes of ensuring enhanced consumer protection, the ASEAN Online Business Code of Conduct, as also mentioned by the Secretary General, contains 15 core commitments towards consumers that can only be applied and adopted by online business. The code, of course, complies with the ASEAN High-Level Principle on Consumer Protection number 8, which is consumers in e-commerce are protected. And the joint endeavor between the ACCP and the ACCEC, the Code of Conduct, hopes to encourage online businesses to have stronger commitment on data protection, higher standard of credibility and transparency, more efforts to address complex demands and compliance, and a promise to deliver to consumers. Next slide, please. For the government institutions, we have developed the ASEAN Capacity Building Roadmap for Consumer Protection. The roadmap, of course, is to strengthen consumer protection regime in ASEAN, supportive measures to meet the goals of the ASCP to develop a regional 5-year rollover capacity building plan with a regional as well as national component building block activities. We have also developed the ASEAN guidelines on cross-border B2C dispute resolution. This is, of course, to guide and facilitate the institution handling and infringement settlement of dispute between consumers and businesses across jurisdiction. And in relation to the ASEAN Rapid Alert System, information exchange which have been developed, the information for public of unsafe consumer products in the products uploaded by the AMS system intends to raise awareness for consumers. The next slide, please. Other than that, of course, the report on the needs and gaps in access to dispute resolution and address systems in ASEAN is an ongoing deliverables. And the purpose of it is to study the needs and gaps for the access of this in every of the AMS, with the long-term view of developing a ASEAN network of online dispute resolution and also alternative dispute resolution to ensure that cross-border disputes are resolved. Other than that, we are developing an improved ASEAN product alert system and a framework for the collection and assessment of data on product-related injuries at the national and ASEAN level. The 2 training modules to apply good consumer protection practices on marketing and advertising and data privacies are being developed at this point in time. And these are also targeted to provide government institutions with the knowledge and skills to create and implement policies that enables effective consumers law enforcement. Next slide, please. So for the government institutions, we are developing the ASEAN Toolkit on Sustainable Consumption, which is ongoing. This is basically to promote sustainable consumption to businesses, consumers, and other relevant stakeholders to enable and to capacity build government agencies to formulate policies for these purposes. The next deliverables on the guidelines on consumer impact assessment. This is the guideline and toolkit to provide a framework for systematically screening policies, law, and regulations according to the likely impact on consumers. These are, of course, important for the purposes of enabling and to know the impact of policies for future and better policy making. And the voluntary external peer reviews of national laws, regulations, and e-commerce are being we've just been completed. And in this regard, the Philippines report would be made available to the public and following its publication shortly. Other than that, next slide, please. We have developed the ASEAN Online Guidelines on Online Dispute Resolution, which is still ongoing and is a part and parcel. It complements the study on needs and gaps on the access to system and redress. The other deliverables which we have completed is the ASEAN Consumer Empowerment Index, which is an important index to ensure to find out the benchmark of national level consumers empowerment in each AMS. Currently, the ASEAN consumers are considered as moderately empowered at 63.7%. Other than that, there are 3 regional guidelines for the development of laws and regulations, of which e-commerce is what we are doing now. And one of the purposes of this conference is to use and apply the outcomes for the purpose of developing the ASEAN guidelines on e-commerce. Other than e-commerce would be the unfair contract terms and product safety and labeling. Next slide, please. We are also working with the ACCC, the Consumer Affairs Program, for the purposes of providing capacity building activities on a bilateral basis, and also to address consumer challenges on issues such as consumer product safety and also consumer scams. Next slide, please. Other ACCP activities include regular interaction with international organizations on best practices, outputs with UNCTAD and OECD, participation in UN and intergovernmental experts and law. So what are the challenges for the ASEAN digital economy? These, by and large, are still the same. Unfair online business practices, where advantage of consumers, there's a lot of taking advantage of consumers through unfair contracts on false product information. There's also the challenges of data protection, online frauds and scams. Then there's also the challenges, next slide please, on redress for national and cross-border disputes, consumer awareness and education, which have to be provided continuously, and also the issue of limited resources. If I may just move on to the last part of my presentation, the next slide, please. The e-commerce guidelines, which we are going to develop, would include the following areas: background and overview, where we will deal with the general level relevance of consumer protection e-commerce, providing orientation, devising appropriate measures, key concepts, general principles, information and disclosure. Next slide, please. Other than that, there'll be topics on data protection, privacy, mobile and online payments, liability and redress, digital literacy skills and co-regulation, and finally, regional cross-border cooperation. And finally, one important issue for us in ASEAN, of course, would be the issue of platform liability, to what extent in which we need to impose liability or obligation on platforms, and what's the role that consumers have to play in terms of looking after themselves as well, whether the principle of caveat emptor should apply. And of course, the participation of other stakeholders, like brand owners and also government agencies, so that a more holistic overview and strategy can be developed to address all the issues in the digital economy impacting the consumers. Finally, to wrap up very quickly, the growth of the digital economy, the last slide, please, is exponential, as mentioned by the previous speakers. It's a game changer, and consumer protection must continue to evolve, and cross-border transaction will be the default, requiring regional cooperation. Redress and access to alternative dispute resolution with enforceable remedies must be developed so that they would not only be paper judgment for consumers. Data privacy and security issues have to be ensured in order to develop trust, and consumer awareness and constant education have to be carried out constantly. And with that, I'd like to thank the BMJV, GGIZ, and also all the stakeholders and those who are present here today for making this conference a success. I wish you all a fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Excellency, Mr. Looi, thank you very much for that very comprehensive and very interesting overview. And let me just say to our audience, dear ladies and gentlemen, this is now an opportunity for you to pose your questions, both to Mr. Looi and also to State Secretary Kastrup. Please use our question window for that. You'll see it right below the chat window on your screens on the right-hand side, and you can also send a short commentary via the chat if you like. And we do just have a couple of questions that have already come in, so I will pose those to our speakers. And the first question that has come in to us from I presume, student or perhaps professor or faculty at the University of Indonesia is this: Consumer activities in the digital age are besieged by growing problems related to the complexity, opacity, and uncertainty around the use of personal data, as well as misleading, unethical, and fraudulent commercial practices. What are the challenges that consumer rights protection is facing in the digital age? Dear State Secretary, perhaps you want to list, let's say, the top 3, because that is a very big question.
And I think this is the real big question we all face. And I think what is mentioned here is really, I think, the entire core of what we need to tackle. And I think my first takeaway is something which was already mentioned by my predecessor in speaking. I think, and this is really the international cooperation. I think if we have complexity, opacity, uncertainty, we really try to strive for a kind of a global understanding. What do we mean with that? And this is not just a quick and fast shot. I think this will really also need that we discuss our societies, how they are working, how can we empower people, how can we give control, and this is one very important issue, that those who give the data, who deliver the data, and this is of course very useful that they give the data, they deliver them. I think people have to be safe that they are not used against them, either in breaching the privacy, or the other issue, make economic models of natural monopolies, which in the end will destroy competition and then also consumer benefits. So we really need to bring this on a global level in the end. Of course, we have all to do our homework, but then we should discuss it in the international fora with the help of the G20, with the help of the OECD. I think this is all. This is, I think, my message to tackle this flower pot which was presented here by the question.
Thank you very much. And I want to come back and dig a little bit deeper in a moment on the question of international cooperation. But first of all, to Mr. Looi, the same question. You also outlined a broad range of risks. Which are the main ones that really keep you up at night as in your capacity as head of division?
Thank you very much. I think one of the main challenges is really the mastery of technology. We are very concerned because for whatever legislative approaches and also the strategy that we implement, we would try not to be like, one step behind what the perpetrators are doing in terms of the deployment of their technology. Apparently, we should ensure that our technology is actually moving faster and ahead of the perpetrator and the organized crimes, because they do have access and deep pockets, and they're able to ensure that these technologies would be able to be used to manipulate and also to avoid and circumvent all the steps that we might take to try to stop them and enforce the laws that we have sort of passed. But other than that, also the consumers themselves must also play a very strong role, and I think this is when education is very important to start off from very, very young, because I understand that if there are really issues such as this, which is very challenging, and also then we really need to start them off at a very young age to understand that when you deal with the internet economy and all that, you have to ensure that your common sense is not being surrendered. And then if you sense there's red flags, you must be able to act on it and to know when not to trust the website that you're on. But more importantly also is because in terms of the consumers, in terms of numbers, there's so many of us, and I believe, and also we have so much more resources than those who want to abuse and manipulate this system. I believe in the longer term, we should be able to win this game and not to allow them to exploit us. Thank you.
Mr. Looi, can I just ask you one follow-up on the issue of raising public awareness and providing consumers with more information? That is a key part of your strategy, and you outlined the different aspects of that. Are you concerned, though, about information overload? Is there a point at which, are there limits to empowering consumers by providing more information?
I fully appreciate your question, Ms. Crane. in fact, what I have in mind is, really not about just, just pouring information and then overloading them, but really to help to address these information at the most basic level. Like, for example, developing an icon. When you look at a particular icon or a red flag, or maybe one or two words,
Mr. Looi, I'm just going to interrupt you there because we are having some breakup. Maybe we're going to give your online connection a chance to restore itself, and I will go briefly to the State Secretary. Mr. Looi, I don't know if you can hear me, but
education.
There we go. Better. Okay, I think we're going to work on improving your connection. Let me just pose the same question to State Secretary Kastrup. State Secretary, clearly there are risks associated with information overload. What would you say are the most crucial pieces of information we need to get to consumers, and how can we avoid overloading them with information and thereby undermining the goal of raising awareness?
Yeah, I think the most important information the consumer may need is what is happening with his behavior in the digital rooms. So, and this is about data. This is about leaving a trace in the digital rooms, and that this is then reused. And I think this is all the critical things. So this will empower artificial intelligence, but this will also empower via artificial intelligence and learning machines. Also kind of endangering your privacy. It will put you into dark patterns. You can be manipulated. You see, there is no public curation within the internet. You have just to rely on the safety itself. There's a general regulation. But I think the main issue would be what is happening with the informations and the traces you leave in the internet. You can do this, of course, a bit with empowerment and literacy, but we may also need a kind of a societal structure for that. So what institutions in the digital room can help the individual consumers, maybe also for a kind of a collective redress. And this, of course, can be the state, the public, but I think most important is probably that we also have an institutional design in the digital rooms, on the platforms, within the platforms, where you have a kind of a collective redress possibility, for instance, via data trustees or data intermediaries, who may also be able to check algorithms which are used on you. So I think we need this public oversight, we need regulation, empowerment, digital literacy, but we may also need a new, say, societal institutional design in the digital rooms, where people can go at it also quickly. You see, if it's about regulation and the law, this will take time. It's necessary to have a regulation, to have a law, but much more important is that consumers, civil society can immediately react to fraudulent issues, to unsafe products, or to dark patterns.
Thank you very much. Let me try and see whether Mr. Looi's connection is better now. Mr. Looi, unfortunately, I stopped you in midstream there. If your connection's better, you're welcome to pick up where you left off in regard to the potential of information overload for consumers. And I would add another question as well, because the State Secretary just talked about the importance of ensuring that business adhere also to codes of conduct. You yourself mentioned that, but I would have a similar question on that point, which is how far voluntary codes of conduct really take us. Of course, there are a lot of economic incentives for business to use some of the manipulative devices we're talking about. So perhaps join up your answer on voluntary codes of conduct for business with information and public awareness for consumers.
Yeah, thank you very much. As far as voluntary compliance is concerned, of course, there would definitely be a place in which we can start by developing awareness first on the part of the consumers, and also the need on the part of the businesses to ensure that the practices comply with certain international standards. It will have to be a graduated and step-by-step approach. You can't just go straight in and start to impose laws and making it mandatory. And it also takes a long time as well. There's a need to develop, of course, some kind of a culture of awareness of ethical behavior, not only on the part of the businesses, but also whoever that access the internet for the purposes of the various business transactions that they go into. And insofar as building awareness is concerned, of course, a very important aspect of it is our own common sense. Whilst it is important to have a lot of activities and education and awareness that's being carried out in the environment, we must also rely and actually believe in our own intuition, our own judgment, and also also to know that we are able to tell when we are going to be taken in for a ride. So it is important to highlight those education, but it's also important to build their confidence within their personal assessment of the digital environment around them. And finally, I suppose I just want to add that we are not alone as far as the consumers are concerned. There's a need for peer references. There's a need for us to check with our friends, check with our communities and neighbors. If we come across, like for example, a deal which is like too good to be true, chances are it is going to be too good to be true and all that. And so we should refrain from parting with our monies and all that. And a lot of these are really just common sense to begin with. And sometimes it's very unfortunate to hear of a lot of the vulnerable and the marginal, falling prey to all this. But I believe the information and campaign must continue to be done, not only just in the main languages, but also in the local languages as well, because like in ASEAN, we've got like many different types of languages and communities, and this takes time to be translated. And I believe the work has to be continued on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me now, in our remaining time, pick up just a little bit on that theme of international cooperation and how we can share best practices. At the end of Mr. Loi's remarks, dear State Secretary, he talked about looking to see what might be relevant for ASEAN, for Southeast Asia, within the new scope of the EU approach in the Digital Service Act and the Digital Markets Act. Perhaps you could just delve a bit deeper for us, if you would, as to where you see the sort of centerpiece of those two approaches and what you think might be transferable to a different set of cultural circumstances. What's the heart of the matter that perhaps could transcend regional differences?
Yeah, that's a tricky question, and it's not that easy to answer, to be very honest. Nevertheless, I think if we start with the Digital Services Act, I think there are two main issues at stake. One is what we discuss here mainly. This is the so-called transaction side. It's what was happening on trading platforms. I think there, of course, it's really important that the big global players really take on their own responsibility here. So it's about the liability, and the great platforms cannot just say we just bring demand and supply together. We are kind of a neutral intermediary, as these platforms also start to produce own products, and I think they have to take some, consumer protection on themselves, and they cannot just say we are free of any liability what is happening on our platform. And I think this is one issue for sure, I think, which will be true also for the Asian countries as well. So that's one part, and I think and this is then all about micro tracking on advertising, on dark patterns, which was already mentioned here in the room. The other side I would like to highlight is the so-called interaction side. And this is a bit about hate speech, bullying in the net, that people are were forced in the end, for instance, to drop out and say, I do leave the digital discourse. And this is so-called silencing. So, and this is why we are very eager to have a tight control also in these societal dangerous developments, that people are bullied within the net, they are hate messages, even threats posed on them. And I think this is another issue we really need to control, and this has something to do what we also discuss on the European level, what is to be notice and take down. Yeah, remember what happened in the United States, for instance, with some comments of the former president there. So I think this is really an issue which has probably a bit more intercultural differentiation. I'm very well aware of that. So there is no one-size-fits-all solution, but I think we all want to have stable societies where you can live in the digital rooms without being endangered or forced out. I think this would then also hamper the societal discourse. And last point, maybe on a very global level, and I think this will also be discussed by Monika Schnitzer later here, is about there is a certain relation also of a functioning Digital Services Act for global competition. So there is also an issue there that a well-done consumer protection can also help to control, say, market positions which have a monopolic structure and which will then in the end hamper consumer benefits and consumer rents.
Thank you very much. Let me go to Mr. Looi and ask for your response to that. And what we're essentially hearing is that we can't simply assume that roles in the digital space are analog to what we know in the real world, but we're hearing from the State Secretary, we need to really take a look at the functional role that different actors play and how they interrelate in the digital space, particularly in regard to digital marketplaces, online marketplaces. Does that resonate with you, and what kind of challenges does that pose for policymakers in Southeast Asia?
Well, of course, over in Southeast Asia, unlike the European Union, we don't have a union, but we are an association of 10 different countries, 10 different set of laws. So, of course, what we are doing now is to develop those domestic legislation so that we approximate some kind of a convergence, maybe with a longer view of having a more unified kind of laws. The strategy is concerned to contain and to address the scourge in the digital economy. So it's not going to be one particular stakeholder. It's going to be a holistic partnership involving both the platform owners, the brand owners, the consumers themselves, the government agencies, and also all the various intersectoral government agencies for the purposes of ensuring that we are working hand in hand and with a broad vision to try to address this scourge, because the parties and the opposite people that we are working at are the organized crimes, and they are very well organized. So we have to be more organized than them, because we do have a lot of resources, and we do have all the various strategies and also the regional platform for this to happen. So I believe in the longer term, this platform and also the challenges of the digital economy can be addressed, provided that we work together and not think only about our own self-interest and also our interest from the point of view of business or whatever. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Looi Teck Kheong, Head of Division at the ASEAN Secretariat, for sharing your thoughts with us. And I would like to also say to the audience that I'm sorry that sometimes we had some dropout on that line. Nonetheless, you have shared with us very, very interesting thoughts about where ASEAN is going in this very critical area. And I'd also like to thank State Secretary Kastrup for sharing best practices and for giving us an overview on what is being done here in Germany and Europe to enhance consumer protection, particularly in connection with online marketplaces. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, we now have an opportunity to take a break. I so much wish that we were all together and we could enjoy some fellowship while we perhaps get a bit of refreshment, but we will take this break virtually and reconvene here in exactly 15 minutes to dive deeper on the issue of how we empower consumers, how we provide them with the information that they need to make truly informed decisions in online marketplaces. So come back in 15 minutes, please, for that very interesting session. See you shortly.